Batman 2078. Batman and Cyberpunk fanfic by Unlucky Harms. Prologue. The Dead Man's Walk. The desert didn't care about timelines. It didn't care about speed forces, multiversal collapses, or the ashes of gods that coated the back of Bruce Wayne's throat. The desert only cared about heat and entropy, and right now, Bruce was losing to both. His HUD flickered, a jagged amber tear across his vision. The Beyond-era suit, a marvel of symbiotic nanotechnology and kinetic weave engineered by Victor Stone in the final days of the war, was screaming at him. System alert. Thermal regulation failing. Coolant leak detected. Core temp, 102 degrees Fahrenheit. Lazarus compound reserves, 18%. Warning, low supply. Bruce stopped. He didn't breathe. The suit breathed for him, recycling the dry, irradiated air of the Southern California wastes, scrubbing out the sulfur and the silica. He stood atop a ridge of jagged rock, his silhouette broken by a tattered, heavy cloak he'd scavenged from a dead nomad 3 days ago. Beneath the cloak, the suit was a matte black sarcophagus. He looked west. It rose from the horizon not like a city, but like a tumor of light. The pollution haze, a thick ochre smog, couldn't dampen the neon hemorrhage bleeding into the night sky. Holographic fish swam through clouds of toxic exhaust. Beams of solid light pierced the gloom, advertising pleasures and products that no longer existed in the rest of the fractured world. Night City. The data shard he had pulled from the crushed skull of a scavenger in the ruins of the Batcave sat heavy in a magnetic pouch on his belt. It was old tech, corrupted, but the coordinates were precise. The world had burned, alliances had crumbled, and nations had dissolved into warring city-states. Yet this place had simply metabolized the apocalypse and kept selling it. Bruce took a step, and his left knee buckled. A spike of agony, white and pure, shot up his spine. Injury detected. Left patella fracture. Administering analgesic. Administering Lazarus microdose. Belay Lazarus, Bruce rasped, his voice a corrupted file grinding through the vocal synthesizer. Save it for cardiac failure. Override accepted. Pain is mandatory. He forced the leg straight. The servo motors whined, a high-pitched sound lost in the howling wind, and locked the joint into place. He wasn't walking anymore. He was piloting his own corpse. He began the descent. Chapter 1. Market Corrections. The Badlands were a graveyard of ambition. Bruce moved through the wreckage of wind turbines and rusted shanties, a ghost in the machine. His stealth protocols were active, the suit bending light and dampening sound, but against the sheer volume of background radiation and electronic noise, he was merely a shadow among shadows. He reached the perimeter of the Biotechnica flats shortly after 0300 hours. An automated cargo convoy was idling at a checkpoint, massive wheels churning the dust. The drone trucks were hauling synthesized protein paste into the city. Bruce sprinted. It was an ugly, heavy movement, devoid of the acrobatic grace he once possessed. He leaped, his magnetic grips engaging with a metallic thud against the undercarriage of the rear transport. He pulled himself up into the wheel well, wedging his body between the hydraulic suspension and the axle. The convoy lurched forward. The smell hit him instantly. Not the clean ozone of the desert, but the stench of the city. Unwashed bodies, frying oil, burning plastic, and the metallic tang of blood. As the transport rumbled past the border turrets and onto the immaculate pavement of the highway, Bruce accessed the local networks. His Cowl's computer, a quantum-encrypted beast far superior to the consumer-grade decks of this era, began to handshake with the city's infrastructure. It was overwhelming. In Gotham, the data had been a stream. Here, it was a tsunami. Millions of constant transactions, cybernetic telemetry, advertisement algorithms fighting for dominance in the optic nerves of the populace. Police bands screaming about 200s 11s, 500s 5s, cyberpsychosis events. He wasn't overwhelmed by the crime. He was overwhelmed by the integration. In Gotham, crime was a deviation from the norm. It was a sickness. Here, as the convoy passed beneath the towering megablocks of Santo Domingo, Bruce realized the terrifying truth. The crime wasn't a sickness. It was the blood supply. The gangs, the Corps, the police, they weren't warring factions. They were competing organs in the same beast. The transport slowed as it hit traffic near a checkpoint into Haywood. Bruce dropped. He hit the asphalt in a roll, his cloak flaring, and vanished into an alleyway before the optical sensors of a passing patrol drone could resolve his silhouette. He was in Night City. The alley smelled of synthetic urine and rot. Bruce pressed his back against the damp concrete, checking his diagnostics. The suit was holding, but the power cells were unable to draw sufficient charge from the ambient grid without risking detection. He needed a safe house. He needed resources. But first, he needed to understand the predator he had walked into the mouth of. A scream echoed from the street mouth. Not a scream of terror, but of rage. Bruce moved. He didn't glide. The cape was for camouflage, not flight. He moved with the predatory economy of a tiger, silent and low. He reached the edge of the alley and peered out. 3 men. Tiger claws, if the database match on their luminous tattoos and katanas was correct. They had cornered a vendor, an old man with a prosthetic arm that sparked intermittently. His stall, selling grilled synth meat, was overturned. "Protection rates went up, Gigi," one of the claws said, his voice modulated by a cheap Vox box. "Inflation. You know how it is." "I paid," the old man spat, clutching his chest. "I paid the tigers yesterday." "That was for last week. This is for next week. Futures market." The ganger laughed, raising a monowire-laced bat. Bruce analyzed the scene. Target 1, cybernetic legs. Reinforced spine, melee weapon. Threat, moderate. Target 2, smart link grip, submachine gun. Threat, high. Target 3, netrunner, interface plugs glowing. Threat, critical. In the old days, Batman would have dropped a smoke pellet, disabled the guns with a disruptor, and hung them from a gargoyle. But Bruce had no smoke pellets. He had no disruptor. He had 18% Lazarus and a suit running on fumes. He needed to be efficient. He stepped out of the shadows. He didn't shout. He didn't announce himself. He simply walked toward them, the heavy polymer boots crunching on the broken glass. The netrunner saw him first. "The fuck is that, some cosplayer?" Target 2 raised the SMG. "Lost, Choom? Back off." Bruce didn't stop. The netrunner's eyes flared red. Quick hack detected. Reboot optics. Bruce felt the intrusion instantly. His HUD staticked, the world dissolving into digital noise. But the cowl's defenses were not built on the same architecture as this city's demons. It was an alien operating system, a firewall of pure, paranoid code written by the paranoid mind of the world's greatest detective. Intrusion blocked. Tracing source. Update. Feedback loop. The netrunner screamed, clawing at his eyes as his own deck fried his optic nerves with a terabyte of garbage data. He collapsed, convulsing. Target 2 panicked. The smart gun tracked Bruce, the micro-missiles locking onto his chest signature. He pulled the trigger. Bruce didn't dodge. He couldn't. Instead, he surged forward, trusting the kinetic weave. The bullets impacted. Thud, 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 staggering him, cracking a rib beneath the armor, but failing to penetrate. Impact detected. Torso. Rib fracture. Administering stimulant. "Ugh," Bruce grunted, the chemical cocktail flooding his veins, turning pain into cold focus. He reached Target 2. He didn't punch. He grabbed the man's wrist and twisted. The sound of servos snapping and bone shattering was loud. The gun fell. Bruce drove a palm into the man's throat, crushing the larynx. Target 1, the melee fighter, lunged with the bat. He was fast, Sandevistan speed. To a normal eye, he would have been a blur, but Bruce had fought Eobard Thawne. He had fought gods who moved between seconds. A street thug moving at 200% speed was still slow. Bruce anticipated the arc. He stepped inside the swing, taking the monowire hit on his reinforced gauntlet. The wire bit deep, sparking against the underlying circuitry, but it held. Bruce headbutted the man, the cowl's hardened composite meeting a human face. The fight was over in 6 seconds. The tiger claws lay broken on the wet asphalt. Bruce stood over them, his breath hitching as the adrenaline faded, and the pain of the broken rib bloomed. The vendor stared at him. Who are you? UNCPD? MaxTac? Bruce looked at the old man. He looked at the shattered stall. He looked at the tiger claws, whose biomonitors were already pinging Trauma Team, a service that would likely reject the call due to insufficient credit. No, Bruce said. The voice modulator made him sound like tectonic plates shifting. He knelt by the unconscious netrunner. He didn't tie him up. Instead, he ripped the interface cable from the thug's wrist port and jacked it into his own gauntlet. Accessing local financial data. Wallet. Encrypted. Brute force cracking. Success. Transferring funds. 4,500 euro dollars. Bruce stood up. He turned to the vendor. He reached into a compartment on his belt and pulled out a cred chip. He transferred 500 eddies onto it and tossed it onto the counter. For the damages, Bruce said. And the rest? The vendor asked, eyeing the unconscious gangers. Civil forfeiture, Bruce muttered. He walked away, vanishing into the steam rising from a grate. He hadn't saved the man. He had just adjusted the risk-reward ratio of the block. Night City didn't have gargoyles, but it had ventilation shafts. Bruce found a maintenance sub-basement beneath a condemned apartment complex in Watson. It was cramped, flooded with 3 inches of oily water, and infested with rad roaches, but it was shielded from scanning. He stripped. The process was agony. The suit peeled away from his skin with a wet, sucking sound. Where the black armor ended, the scars began. His body was a map of the war. Burned tissue from heat vision, jagged lines from shrapnel, and the strange, shimmering veins where the Lazarus compound had rewritten his cellular structure. He sat on a crate, shivering in the damp air. He was 45 years old, but his biology was a ruin of trauma and artificial preservation. He looked at his reflection in a pool of stagnant water. The face of Bruce Wayne was still there, beneath the grime and the beard he had grown in the wastes. But the eyes were different. The soft playboy veneer was gone. These were the eyes of a man who had watched the universe die and refused to close the casket. He opened the holographic display from his gauntlet, projecting a map of the city onto the peeling wall. He had 4,000 eddies. He had a damaged suit. He had no Batmobile, no Alfred, no Commissioner Gordon. He began to analyze the data he had scraped from the Tiger Claw's shard during the transfer. It wasn't just gang activity. It was a ledger. Protection money collected, 12,000 EB. Tribute to Wakako, 40%. Arasaka supply chain bribe, 15%. NCPD look-away fee, 10%. He traced the lines. The gang wasn't just stealing. They were tax collectors for the system above them. If he stopped the gang, the corp would just hire new contractors. He couldn't fight this with fists, not forever. The Lazarus would run out. The suit would fail. He needed leverage. Bruce Wayne needed to die so that he could be reborn, but not as a billionaire prince. This city ate billionaires for breakfast unless they had teeth. He needed to become a fixer, a ghost in the machine. He pulled a small, pristine razor from his med kit. He began to shave the beard. As the hair fell into the dirty water, Bruce Wayne's jawline reemerged, sharp, aristocratic, cold. He wouldn't buy Wayne Enterprises back. He would build something leaner, something invisible. He looked at the news feed scrolling on his gauntlet. A headline flashed. Kang Tao stock dips after failed prototype leak. Bruce narrowed his eyes. A dip meant volatility. Volatility meant opportunity. He had 4,000 eddies. In Gotham, that was dinner. In Night City, on the street level, that was seed capital. Computer, Bruce whispered to the silence. Open a new file. Designation, Oracle. File opened. Cross-reference all unsolved industrial accidents in the Watson district over the last 6 months. Look for patterns in insurance payouts versus reported casualties. He wasn't here to save Night City. He was here to learn it. Chapter 2. The Ghost of Crime Alley. 4 hours was not sleep. It was a reboot sequence for a system running on corrupted hardware. Bruce Wayne opened his eyes in the damp dark of the sub-basement. His internal clock, a discipline honed over decades of polyphasic sleep cycles, woke him at precisely 700. There was no grogginess, only the immediate crushing weight of gravity, and the dull throb of the fractured rib. He sat up, the stagnant water in the room rippling away from his boots. He checked his body. The bruising on his torso was a sprawling galaxy of purple and black. The Lazarus compound fighting a losing war against simple kinetic trauma. He wasn't healing fast. He was just healing enough to function. He stashed the bat suit inside a rusted ventilation drum, welding it shut with a localized burst from the suit's own microtorch before powering it down. He couldn't wear it. Not today. Today, he had to walk among the living. He dressed in the scavenged clothes he'd pulled from a dumpster behind a laundromat during the night. Heavy cargo pants, a gray thermal shirt that clung to the dense muscle of his chest, and a heavy, high-collared coat that hid his width. He looked like a drifter, a nomad who had washed out of the Badlands. But the face was the problem. Even without the cowl, Bruce Wayne's face was a map of violence. A faint white scar ran through his eyebrow. His jaw was set in a permanent clench. He didn't look like a victim of Night City. He looked like a perpetrator. He picked up the portable deck he had salvaged and modified. It was a chunky, archaic slab of military-grade polymer, stripped from the arm mount of the scavenger he'd encountered in the ruins of the Batcave. He couldn't jack in directly. He had no neural link, no chip slot behind his ear, no personal port in his wrist. To the people of this city, that made him a cripple. To Bruce, it made him a fortress, a closed system. He climbed the ladder and pushed open the grate. The sun didn't shine in Watson. It just illuminated the grime. Daylight in Night City was an assault. Bruce stepped onto the sidewalk and was immediately buffered by a wall of sound and light. Holographic advertisements, translucent and 3 stories tall, walked through the crowds. A woman made of purple light offered real water, 99% pure, for a price that could feed a family for a week. A 20-foot gun spun in the air above a store called the Second Amendment, promising home security for the post-collapse family. The smell was worse than the night. The heat baked the trash, mixing with the chemical sweetness of synth fuel and the metallic tang of cheap chrome. Bruce walked. He kept his pace steady, his eyes moving constantly. He wasn't sightseeing. He was downloading the operational reality of the streets. He noticed the segregation instantly. It wasn't racial. It was hardware-based. Those with high-end chrome, gold-plated skin, optical implants that glowed with corporate logos, legs that whirred with hydraulic grace, walked down the center of the pavement. The unaugmented, or those with Gannic looks and cheap, rusted cyberware, hugged the walls. Bruce hugged the wall. He held the portable deck in his left hand, his thumb tracing the trackpad. He wasn't connected to the net. That was suicide without a proxy. But he was reading the local Wi-Fi signals, sniffing the packets flying through the air. NCPD drone patrol pattern, grid 4. Gang activity, maelstrom spikes in Northside. Stock market ticker, Arasaka plus 2%, Militech minus 1%. He felt the stare of a passerby, a youth with a jaw replaced by a speaker grill. The kid sized Bruce up, looked at the scars, looked at the size of his shoulders, and looked at the heavy combat boots. The kid looked away. In Gotham, fear was theatrical. Here, fear was a calculation. Is he worth the ammo? No. Bruce turned a corner and found himself back at the market stall. The vendor, the old man with the sparking arm, was there. He was scrubbing the graffiti the Tiger Claws had sprayed on his counter. The stall was open, selling skewers of something that looked like chicken but smelled like algae. Bruce approached. He didn't smile. He placed 5 eddies on the counter. Protein, Bruce said. His voice was gravel, unmodulated now, but naturally deep. The old man looked up. Recognition flashed in his cyber eye. He froze for a second, looking around for the gangers, then relaxed. He slid a skewer onto a paper tray. On the house, the old man muttered. For yesterday. Bruce shook his head and pushed the money forward. Business is business. You lose margin, you lose the stall. The old man hesitated, then swiped the eddies. You're not from here, Taikyu. You talk like a corp, but you dress like a raffin. I've been away, Bruce said. He took a bite of the skewer. It was salty, tough, and hot. It was the best thing he had eaten in 6 months. Long time. Everyone comes back, the old man sighed, resuming his scrubbing. City has a gravity well. Sucks you in, chews you up. Bruce leaned against a Duracrete pillar next to the stall, watching the crowd. Things have changed. The power structures. Power structures? The old man laughed, a dry, rattling sound. Arasaka, Militech, Kang Tao, same heads, different hydra. They own the air, the water, and the bandwidth. The rest of us just rent the space inside our own heads. Bruce watched a drone buzz overhead, scanning faces. I used to know a name, he said, keeping his tone casual, almost bored. Wayne Enterprises. They had a foothold in tech, logistics. Haven't seen their logo since I crossed the border. The old man stopped scrubbing. He looked at Bruce, his mechanical aperture squinting. Wayne? The old man repeated. You have been gone a long time, Choom. Or you've been on ice. Humor me. The vendor wiped his hands on a greasy rag. Wayne Industries. That's history book stuff. Pre-collapse. Pre-data crash even. They were big, yeah? American money. Old money. What happened? The usual, the man shrugged. Competition. Hostile takeover. But it wasn't just business. It was personal decay. The family fell apart. Bruce felt a cold spike in his chest, sharper than the rib fracture. Fell apart how? Back in the 20s, maybe earlier. The father, Thomas Wayne, he was a shark, a surgeon turned industrialist, but he lost his head, started making bad plays, selling off divisions for pennies on the dollar, liquidating assets to fund nothing, just burning cash. Why? Bruce asked. The skewer turned to ash in his mouth. The old man leaned in, whispering, lowering his voice, as if discussing the ghosts of the city was bad luck. His wife, Martha, she went cyber psycho before they even had a name for it. Total mental break. They say she was screaming in the streets of Gotham. That was a city, right? Before the quake? Yes, Bruce said softly. Gotham was a city. She lost it, the vendor continued, because of the kid. Bruce went very still. The kid? Yeah, their son. Bruce, I think? 8 years old. Gunned down in an alleyway outside a theater. Some random junkie wanted her pearls. Popped the kid twice in the chest. Just like that. The world tilted. Bruce Wayne stood in the middle of a neon-drenched marketplace, surrounded by the noise of 1,000,000 souls, and felt absolute silence. In his memory, in the memory of the multiverse that was supposed to be, he stood over the bodies of his parents, the pearls falling, the gunshots, the vow, the bat crashing through the window, the trauma that created the Batman. But here, the gunman missed the parents. He killed the child. The parents survived? Bruce asked. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. Physically? Sure, the old man said, scrubbing a stubborn stain. But they died in that alley too. Thomas Wayne lost his drive. Couldn't protect his own blood, so what was the point of the empire? He got weak, and in this world, when you get weak, the sharks come. Arasaka bought the robotics division. Militech took the weapons contracts. Petrochem took the energy sector. By 2025, Wayne Enterprises was just a shell company holding bad debt. They say Thomas drank himself to death in a penthouse he didn't own anymore. Martha, institutionalized. The vendor looked at Bruce. Why you asking about dead corpse anyway? Looking for salvage? Bruce stared at the pavement. The cracks in the concrete looked like veins. Something like that, Bruce whispered. This wasn't an alternate timeline. This wasn't a what if. The Speed Force War hadn't just rearranged the furniture. It had solidified a reality where hope was statistically impossible. The catalyst for the Justice League, the Batman, had been aborted in the womb of history. Without Batman, there was no check on the corruption. Without the Wayne fortune fighting the good fight, the corporations had unchecked dominion. This was the prime reality now. A world where Bruce Wayne was a footnote on a police report from 50 years ago. Hey, the vendor said, snapping his fingers. You okay, big guy? You look like your chrome just rejected. Bruce looked up. The mask of Bruce Wayne, the persona, slid back into place. Cold, calculated. I'm fine, Bruce said. Just remembering. He pushed off the pillar. Where do people go to access public archives? Hardline connections. No neural interface. The vendor pointed a thumb toward a looming, brutalist concrete block down the street. The data term kiosk near the metro station. It's slow, full of viruses, and costs 2 eddies a minute. Perfect for a relic like you. Thanks. The data term was a graffiti-covered monolith smelling of ozone and stale beer. Bruce slotted his cred chip, paid the fee, and connected his portable deck via a physical cable. He didn't search for Batman. Batman didn't exist. He searched for Wayne. The screen flickered, green text scrolling against a black background. Search results. Wayne, Thomas. Obituary, 2031. Cause of death, liver failure, suicide. Assets liquidated, 2024. Search results. Wayne, Martha. Status, deceased, 2035. Arkham Asylum, decommissioned. Search results. Wayne, Bruce. Status, deceased, 2020. Victim of violent crime. Case number 893-1A. Bruce stared at his own death certificate. It was liberating. If he was dead, he had no enemies. If he was dead, Arasaka wasn't looking for him. If he was dead, he was the ultimate stealth operative. He began to dig deeper. He looked at the liquidation records of Wayne Enterprises. It was a fire sale. Wayne Aerospace, acquired by Orbital Air. Wayne Biotech, acquired by Biotechnica. Wayne Electronics, acquired by Arasaka. He scrolled through the endless list of patents sold for scraps. And then he stopped. Buried in the fine print of the 2023 liquidation, there was a discrepancy. Asset, Project Belfry. Status, unsold, abandoned. Location, Sector 4, Gotham Reclamation Zone, NA, Remote Holding Facility, Night City Outskirts. Description, urban infrastructure, subgrade seismic stabilizers. Bruce's eyes narrowed. Project Belfry. It wasn't a standard Wayne Industries designation. It sounded like Lucius Fox. He checked the details. The seismic stabilizers were listed as massive, immovable infrastructure sunk deep into the bedrock of the city's foundations during an attempted expansion in the early 20s. Arasaka hadn't bought them because they were deemed obsolete sunk costs. But Bruce knew what Lucius called seismic stabilizers. Bunkers. He pulled up the coordinates. They pointed to a location in the industrial wasteland of Arroyo, deep beneath a decommissioned petrochemical refinery. If this reality held to the physics of the old one, Thomas Wayne, in his grief, in his paranoia, might have started building something before he fell apart. Or maybe Lucius did, trying to save the company from the inside. Bruce jacked out. He retrieved his deck. He walked out of the station. The sun was high now, the smog turning the light a sickly yellow. He had a ghost name. He had a dead family. And now he had a destination. But as he walked, his deck vibrated in his pocket. A proximity alert. Bruce didn't break stride. He glanced at the reflection in a shop window. 2 figures were tracking him. Not the clumsy ganging from last night. These were professionals. Suits, earpieces, no visible weapons, which meant concealed subdermal holsters. Corporate security. They weren't tracking Bruce Wayne. They couldn't be. They were tracking the anomaly. Someone had noticed the 4,500 eddy transfer from the Tiger Claws account. Or maybe the algorithm had flagged his search queries at the terminal. Wayne was a dead name, but searching for dead names in a corporate database triggered flags. Information was property. Curiosity was theft. Bruce turned left, heading into a crowded bazaar. He needed to vanish, and he needed to see just how good the opposition was in this timeline. He moved into the crowd, his size parting the sea of people. He spotted a narrow gap between 2 stalls, a maintenance corridor. He slipped inside. The 2 suits followed. Bruce waited in the shadows of a humming generator. He checked his pulse. 50 beats per minute. The first suit stepped into the corridor. Target lost visual, scanning thermal. The second suit moved in. Careful, guy is built like a brick shithouse. He's unaugmented. No heat sig from cyberware, just meat. Bruce stepped out behind them. Meat breaks, Bruce said. The first suit spun, a reflex booster kicking in, his hand blurring toward his chest. Bruce didn't give him the time. He drove a fist into the man's solar plexus. The impact sounded like a wet sandbag hitting a wall. The suit crumpled, gasping, his diaphragm paralyzed. The second suit went for a taser baton. Bruce caught the swing, his grip crushing the man's fingers around the weapon. He twisted, using the man's own momentum to slam him face first into the generator housing. There was a crack of ozone and a spark. The suit went limp. Bruce patted them down. Militech IDs, private contractors. He found a datapad on the first man. He hacked the biometric lock using his own deck's brute force algorithm. Mission: surveillance. Target: unidentified male. Flag: financial irregularity. Unauthorized data access. Arasaka database. Client: Kang Tao. Subcontract. Bruce frowned. He had stolen from Tiger Claws, Arasaka affiliates. He had searched for Wayne, Arasaka data. But the tail was Militech, hired by Kang Tao? The corporations were incestuous. They were spying on each other's spies. Bruce took the datapad. He took their credits, another 800 eddies. He took their comms earpieces. He left them unconscious in the alley. He walked back out into the bazaar, blending into the flow of consumers. The city was a knot, a tangled mess of wires and lies. And for the first time since he woke up in the desert, Bruce Wayne smiled. A grim, terrifying line. He knew how to untie knots. You didn't pull the strings, you cut them. Next stop, he whispered to the smog. Arroyo.